And welcome everybody to another episode of The Most Important Conversations. I'm here with co-host September Dohrmann. September, how are you doing today?
Always great. Doing well. Thank you.
Good, good. Well, it sounds like you've got an interesting topic today that you want to talk about. So I'm going to turn it over to you. What are we talking about?
There's over the years of knowing you, there will be these thoughts that pop into my head, and I'd love to pick your brain on these topics. And this
Hmm.
has been a topic that's been circling for a while through a client, a coaching client that I have. The conversations around do versus create. You know, in the WLA program, we start off with the creator versus consumer. So right there, it tells me the level of importance in understanding the difference between being a creator and being a consumer. And along within that same vein, we've talked about the difference between creating and doing. And so where this conversation is coming from and why it's come up is that over the last several months, I've been working with a client in particular who is looking to be more connected to her authentic self. And this is somebody that I've known for quite some time, and she's aware that I do readings from time to time, and really my coaching services with her. I don't even like using that word because I really am utilizing that ability, and where she gets to ask the questions and an answer is provided from a different energetic space. I'm going to say it that way. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And so her path and what she's waking up to is that she is here to really embody and express the divine feminine. And from that place, they've been focused. And when I say they, I'm referring to the readings and the information that comes through for her. And the focus has been on being mindful of her day-to-day activities and not doing her activities because that's not the expression of the divine feminine, but creating her activities, being a creator of her activities, not the executor of activities. So it's the difference between creating and doing.
Hmm.
And it's as I'm seeing her exercise these messages and this direction of you are the expression of the divine feminine, and you are here to embody that and to lend it and to teach it to other people. We've talked about this a lot too, where we're also in a shift of the masculine world into a more feminine world, where we're moving more into a feminine society, I would say, versus the masculine men's world that has dominated for so long. And so as I'm seeing her put these conversations into practice, she's showing up so much differently. She's softer, she's more feminine, she glows. You know, you see women who are pregnant, they have that pregnancy glow. She has this natural glow that's along the same lines of a pregnancy glow. And I'm seeing how her shift of perspective between doing her activities and being the creator of the activities in her day-to-day life, even when it comes down to parenting, she's wearing it well, and it's really causing some major shifts in her life with that. So I'm not sure that there's really a direct question here. It's more of sharing the experience that I'm having with this client and the awareness that I'm coming to terms with really beginning to understand the difference between being a creator and a consumer. I understand it on a surface level. And I've been in the program for, WLA program going on to 5 years now. And the creator versus consumer conversation is not something that I feel like I've been able to really sink my teeth into. But this experience with my client is causing me to have like a hook into the conversation where I'm going, oh, I see what this looks like as an experience of being a creator versus a consumer. It's like, how do I describe somebody who's the consumer of the doing in their life instead of the being in their life? Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And so I wanted to get your perspective on this conversation and like, what am I experiencing through your lens, through your perspective of what I just shared with you? How would you describe what I'm experiencing, and how is that applied? How can people apply that into their life, and why would they want to apply it into their life?
The first thing to understand is you can never do creation
It's a state of
because
being. Yes.
it's a state of being, which is the distinction of being and doing, but
Sure.
you can never do creation. And that doesn't mean that there aren't things to do around what you are creating. But before you can do, you must create. You see, creativity happens at the level of a different state of consciousness. It's when someone decides to create a table, they don't begin doing the actions of creating the table. The first thing they have to embody and to drop into is, what is the idea of table that I will create? Why am I creating this idea of table? Do I feel connected to the table I want to create? This is why you get so many different designs of things, because one design has a different emotional, energetic feeling than another. You know, I was just on the phone with my mom today, and she's like buying a new couch. And she's like, should I buy this one or this one? I like this one because the way it swoops, the pillows swoop, it has sort of an Asian kind of feel to it. And the other one's more boxy, more modern. And they're both couches. You sit on them, you relax, you put your arms on the armrest, but we choose one over another. How do we choose? Right? This isn't logic. We try to bring logic to things, but logic is not why people buy what they buy. They tell themselves that they buy this because of this, and this. But all of that is, like we talk about in whole life architecture, rational lies. You're rationalizing and making up stories to validate your choice. Your choice is wholly emotional. Your choice is wholly energetic. Your choice is how this makes me feel. But we don't have space in our culture for that language. That language is the language of a creator. A creator is someone who is accessing the energetic, emotional, pre-symbolic, pre-language, pre-form of an idea, and is feeling that long before there's ever any doing to be done about it. And the feeling leads you to do the creation in a way so that you get one couch that looks more Asian and one that looks more modern. That came from feeling. That came from dropping into that creator state. So it's not logical. It's not mechanical. It's not methodological, meaning there aren't steps that sure, there are steps you will take in the doing of creation, but the creation itself is not steps, right? It is a state that you drop into. Number one thing to say. So I also want to say, when you talk about the world is moving into a feminine place, the ideological framework in which we live in the world will reject that statement, because there's baggage in the symbolism of feminine versus masculine as words, as constructs. So I wouldn't even necessarily suggest that to people, because they're going to immediately, it will be seen as a virus in the existing patriarchal construct, and feminism will be attacked. So we talk about creativity because creativity is what we relate to as a feminine quality, but it's not man or woman. All of us have masculine and feminine dynamics as a being human experience. And we know that the more what we call feminine or creator parts of the brain tend to lean to the right brain, and the more masculine, logical, doing based type of stuff is left brain. And so when I say to people, we are in a left brain dominant world, that's what I'm talking about. I'm saying we're more committed to our doingness, we're human doings, and less committed to our beingness. And so creativity is the essence of our beingness, because it's pre-form, pre-language. You know, I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago with a friend Not sure if you're familiar with Noam Chomsky's work with universal grammar. So Noam Chomsky is considered the foremost godfather of linguistics in the world and linguistic theory. He's also very politically active and is a very intelligent man. Years ago, I actually had a pen pal email relationship with him. He teaches at MIT. And we would go back and forth in these emails and we would debate all kinds of things. It was quite fun. I just reached out to him casually and he bit and away we went. But anyway, he came up with this theory called universal grammar. And the idea he was trying to figure out and solve is, how do human beings were born with the conditions for us to learn a language? Chinese, Italian, English, and a baby can learn any language. It doesn't matter. Why? What is that? And so he was thinking, well, there must be a structure in the brain that there's the language, which is the physical symbol of, say, this word, string it together, these symbols mean this. But then there's the grammar below it that helps us understand what that actually means. That's the level of creativity. So the universal grammar is the creative plane, and the actual language we end up speaking and writing is the doing plane, right? So it's just another way to access the same thing I'm trying to say here, which is that when you talk about being the creator, you're talking about dropping into almost a meditative state that you can consistently and persistently be in throughout your day, where you are not quick to freeze and define what this experience is, what it means. Is it good, bad? We get into dualism, we start judging it. So creativity is a softness. It's a flowingness. In Lao Tzu and Taoism, talks about how you cannot destroy the feminine way, because the feminine is like water and the masculine, the left brain, the right brain, is like a rock. It is firm in its knowing, it is attached, it is defined, it is a structure, it is hard, it is rigid. And that's the end part of the creative process, when something exists, and it is. The table is finally here. But before you get to the doing of assembling, carving, staining the table, you have to first connect at an emotional level, at an energetic level, to the essence of table. In metaphysics, it's a distinction between universals and particulars. So in metaphysics, they talk about particulars being like, this is a particular table. You know, if you walked into a room, like say a furniture store, which I know you like to do, you would see hundreds of tables, and they all look different. They have different colors and different legs, but there's a universal grammar, kind of the idea of table, the universal, that's what Chomsky was talking about, that allows you to recognize all of these tables as the same, a being of the same nature. They're all table, even though they look different. I mean, if you looked at them one to the other and compared them and they were on the surface different, how do you know they're both tables? They conform to a superstructure or universal called table. That's in the realm of being a creator. That's the creative realm, to know that. So we're talking about accessing that part of our being, that part of our awareness, that part of our brain that is pre-definition. And because I know what universal table is, I can recognize every particular table as being part of the nature of table. Right? So I hope I'm not losing you on this, but it's, you know, even you asking to define creativity is a doing activity, because I'm now crystallizing it into a form. I'm giving it definition. As soon as I give something definition, it's as much what it is as what it isn't. And the thing about being in a creative state is there's never something that isn't, because it's pre-definition. It only exists as the ultimate is. Or in philosophy, they talk about it as the isness of a thing, right? But we want to define everything because it gives us safety, security, predictability, and all of the things that our brain needs. So that's why it's difficult to be in a creator state.
Yeah, I like what you just said. I almost want to challenge it a little bit.
Yeah.
That to be able to define something, I'm looking for, if I've never experienced anything before, I'm going to ask somebody, well, what is that experience? So that I can relate to it somehow, so that I can grasp it and begin to engage with it. If I don't understand the thing, it can be very challenging to know how to engage with that piece. How do I dance with that part? How do I express that part? How do I step into a space of being that part if I don't understand or have some sort of relatedness? It's like describing an elephant to somebody who's never seen an elephant before, you know? Oh, it's got these thick, four long, thick, big, fat legs, and it's got this kind of skinny little tail and this really, really long nose. Like, how do you describe that? But if you begin to give somebody something that they can relate to, like the universal, we all know what legs are: legs of a table, legs of an animal, legs of a human. But we can describe that that piece is part of what it is, the universal part of what it is. And as you were describing this, the essence of creating is what I'm taking away here. It's giving me some more insight onto what my client isn't experiencing. You know, it's like I'm an observer of this conversation, and I'm so fascinated by the aspect of, for the divine feminine, going back to what you're saying, the divine feminine is more of a flow. It's being in a state of flow and not mechanical, or but there's aspects of doing. I mean, if we look at the Christianity, God created the world. Well, there's an aspect of doing in that, even though there's the aspect of picturing something in your mind to create. Am I saying that where that makes sense?
Well, yeah. Just again to say it another way, though, doing is not part of creating.
I don't understand that. Because if I'm, let's use your table analogy.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, I do woodworking as kind of a hobby. When I want to create something, I first have to imagine, what is this thing going to create? Okay, I need to build a
Mm-hmm.
desk. All right, I'm going to build a desk. How do I want this desk to function? What do I want it to look like? What's the functionality of it? How's the person going to use that? And from all those places of questions, I then can create a picture in my mind of what it's going to look like. Now I'm creating something that's never been created before. A desk has been created, but not like this. This is different. Then there's the part where I go get my tools. I go buy the wood, I pull out the tools that I need, and I begin to do the activity of bringing to life what I see in my mind.
Yeah, but you've already created it in your mind.
But there's a doing aspect to that.
Let me
Say
ask you a
it
question.
differently.
If when you order a furniture from IKEA
Yeah.
and it has the assembly instructions,
Yeah.
are you creating that desk or doing it?
I'm doing it. I'm putting it together. I'm not
That's it.
creating.
That's like everything else. When you have created the idea in your mind, you now have the IKEA plans in front of you,
Yes.
and you just have to carry it out. That's the doing. That's not the creating part. The creating part was coming up with what it
With the
is,
plans. Okay. So
what
when
it's
you
going to
say
be.
that doing it, oh, so that's where you're creating the separation between it's actually two different processes,
There are
is
two
what you're.
different processes. One's left brain, one's right brain. You're not using your right brain when you're assembling IKEA furniture. You're using your left brain.
You know, we talked about, this is funny because right before coming on, we were both going, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. You and I both had some long weeks. It's only Wednesday.
Mhm.
And it definitely feels like a long week. And so right before we got on here, I've done some physical labor this week. I was helping another client put a brick and mortar store together, and there's some pieces that I've been doing with that. And so my body is tired. And I said to you, my body's telling me I'm not designed for manual labor. I'm designed to use my brain.
Mhm.
And so as a creator doesn't necessarily mean I have to be the executor of that creation. I can simply create something here and pass it off to somebody else to do. That helps with the distinction of the creating and
This is why
doing.
I keep saying our society is on the verge of a mental health crisis, the likes of which we're unprepared for.
Mhm.
When you really get this, AI is going to do the doing. People are going to be let go from their jobs because our entire economy is based on doing. We need people to do things. And now we have AI that's going to be the doer. Now the people aren't the doer anymore. What are they going to do? They're not going to do anymore. They're going to be. They're going to be. What are they going to be? Creators. The only essential experience that fundamentally defines humans is always creativity. Problem? Most people don't know how to create. They don't know how to use their imagination. They don't know how to step outside of the rigor of the structure of our society. They've been taught to follow orders, just be machines. And we're now letting actual machines do the doing, and we are no longer required to be machines. So who are we going to be? We're going to be creators, but this means an entirely new form of education. Entirely,
Yes.
because the doing is being done. So now we have a whole society of creators creating the ideas, the concepts of the IKEA table, and the machines are going to do the doing of actually manifesting those ideas into physical space. Doing is not unimportant, but when you conflate doing with creating, which we have done in our society, it creates a lot of confusion for people, and it also leaves them feeling wildly exhausted, disconnected from themselves, and uninspired, with life.
Yeah, you brought up the education in our school system. I mean, our school system is designed to create factory workers. I've kind of seen it that way on a surface level, just in a nutshell. It's they're not teaching children how to really embody their creative essence and what would they create and find that creative expression in them. They're teaching them to follow instructions, get a grade A, be the
Mhm.
fat follow, be a factory worker. And our education system, I mean, that's a whole nother topic in and of itself. But something that you brought up about the creator and how we'll need to switch into a creative mode. There's a content creator that I follow that teaches wealth. I'm really interested by his perspectives. And he shared that there's kind of four levels of income. There's the bottom level of hourly rate, and that's the doing aspect. The example that he gave was look at the housekeeping services at hotels. They are doing the hardest work, the most physical work of keeping the rooms clean and the housekeeping of the hotel, but they also get paid the least. And on the other end of that scale is people who make a significant amount of money and have the wealth, is that they use their intellect, they use their brain, not necessarily their hands, that they're using more of their creative skill and they're putting something creative out there, something new, and offering that. I mean, Jeff Bezos didn't invent the internet, but he did invent something that was super, super convenient. And has been very successful of that. But it was a creation that he had made, and it was really more of the intellect that he used. Are you following me? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
but I want to be careful that just because you're doing quote unquote brain work is still not, accountants and lawyers and
Mhm.
other types of professions like that use their brain. They're not doing manual labor like cleaning bedrooms in a
Sure.
hotel,
Yeah.
but they're still left brain doing. They're not in a creator mode. Just because you're using your brain doesn't mean you're in a creator mode. You can be all left brained. And the doing of accounting and the doing of law is also going to be taken over by AI. So it
Agreed.
isn't a matter of whether you do physical labor or non-physical labor that defines creating versus doing. You can be in a doer job using your left brain, right? So some of the wealthiest people in the world And I would say the wealthiest industries in the world are industries that are connected to creativity, because they create things, they create constructs, concepts, ideas that then get put into physical production to produce that thing. And then people buy that thing and they use that, right? Sometimes they use it to do more creation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just consumption. But if you think of all of the movies, the video games, the music, the new products like truly innovative products, not Me Too copy products, but when Steve Jobs created the iPod, it was a truly new, innovative idea, right? I mean, no one had done that before. Um, and Apple has been pleasantly rewarded and is now, frankly, riding on the legacy of Steve Jobs because they haven't really created anything new since
Mm-hmm.
his death. They've just iterated, right? There's iterations, there's innovations. They've innovated on their own product, but the creation part happened in Steve Jobs, in
Yeah.
Johnny Ives, and some of those engineers' brains,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Anyway, so creativity is feminine. What we relate to as feminine, and we all have that attribute and aspect of ourselves. And it's so quick to move from creating to doing. And incidentally, when you're doing and manifesting the creation that you've come up with, there is a recursive element as well, where in the doing, sometimes you stumble onto things or learn things that you consume back into yourself that leads to new creation. So doing and creation are very closely related, but you're going to see the distinction in plain view as we reorient our society from a doing-based society to a being-based society, and the beingness is us as creators. I mean, just for those who are, religious, and let's go back to, you brought up the Bible, right? God said, I am going to, in the story of Genesis, I am going to make men and women in my image. What is God's image? Creator. So we are made in the image of Creator, right? When God said, let there be light, that was the doing part. God had already needed to conceive of the idea of light in order to say, let there be light. Let there be light was the assembly of the IKEA furniture. Conceiving of a thing that is light was the creator part. So creating and doing are very closely associated. And what we have done is rewarded the creators in our society with most of the power and money, because it's where the real power is, right? A musician creates a piece of music, and then the doing of that is writing it down, singing it, recording it, and packaging it up and selling it out for people to consume. That's the doing part. But the creator part was the making of the music in the first place.
I want to make a correction because I think this is along the lines of what you're talking about. The creator I was referring to a moment ago, he said the highest level of wealth, or the level of value, is imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that in books, Napoleon Hill talks a lot about that. Carnegie Hill and some others of that time talk a
Yeah.
lot about imagination. Disney talks
Yeah.
about it as well. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing that word in the process of, or in the conversation of being a creator, really
Yeah.
leaning into your imagination and what the imagination is capable of. And unfortunately, the school system does not support that.
Because they don't understand it. So, and we talk a lot about this in whole life architecture, because when you're talking about architecting a new life, whether it's your business or your relationships or your health or whatever aspects or all of it, we're teaching people how to be creators of their life and then creating a life that is by design so that then you can go execute the doing and assemble the IKEA furniture of your life, right? But you have to have a container where you create. Now, the imagination, like you just brought up, so we know that the brain does not know the difference between a simulation and the real world. We know this, it's very well documented. There was the reason why airline pilots never have to learn how to fly a plane in a plane until they get to a certain level of competency. And that competency is created, is established in the simulator, the airplane flight simulator. So as far as the brain's concerned, I drive to a building, I walk in with my little ham sandwich lunch and my, and my drink for the day. And I walk in, I say hi to Susie, and she guides me to the simulator. And I go in, I sit down in the simulator, and then the screen turns on. And within seconds, my brain forgets everything that just happened and thinks I'm in an airplane. And when I go into a nosedive, I vomit, I sweat, I get anxious. The whole physiology turns on because the brain totally thinks, holy shit, we're flying and we're about to crash. Now, the simulator is a physical thing that is emulating the simulator we all have in our mind, which is our imagination. When you practice using your imagination, which we do in our visualizations and we do as part of the Whole Life Architecture program, you become a master creator, because inside of the world of your imagination, that is a simulator for you to experience your creation before any doing needs to occur. The more powerful your imagination, the more powerful you can visualize, the more powerful you can embody, where you can physically feel, hear, taste, smell. I mean, let's think about what all these are. These are just chemical and electrical reactions of organ systems that our brain takes that data and transmutes it into something that occurs as real for us. Even the seeing of a car is not how we relate to it. There's also a lag time. Neuroscience is now suggesting there could be up to a 15-second lag time between what we experience and our awareness of it, because the brain is actually making best guesses of the physical world based on all of this data that we take in through our five senses. It creates a guess of the world. It's just a guess. You might actually see color that is different looking than I see, but it's close enough that we can agree it's bluish. But your version of blue may not be mine, because my brain is going to guess at that color different than yours will. Our brain is a machine that is effectively a simulation of what we consider to be real life. That's it. And so when you use your imagination as the simulator that it is, and you practice that, you become a very powerful creator, which means your doing in life is even more accurate, more profound, more perfected, because you've already lived it here. When Michael Jordan says that the reason he's able to shoot those baskets and they're not even rim shots that just swoosh, right? Because he says, I did it 10,000 times in where? My head. What's in his head? His imagination. He visually saw himself doing it over and over and over and over again. Imagine if we lived our lives only taking actions after we've spent hours in our imagination visualizing its perfection. See, people are so quick to do because we're trying to satiate the addictive nature of the brain, which is to feel like we've accomplished something, because that's the game we've set up in our society. But that's not really how we should be living our life.
So now it sounds like three parts, three separate processes. There's the imagination component, the creative component, and then the doing component. Am I hearing that right?
Well, I would say the imagination is part of the creative process.
But the doing is not part of the creative process.
Well, not in a pure sense, but
Okay.
like I was saying, oftentimes, even in your doing, you're going to take things from that experience back up into your mind. This happens in nanoseconds,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to give you a new idea.
Mm-hmm.
So the doing itself is not creative, but the feedback loop that gets created can enhance the creative process, which is why we
Yeah.
often confuse it.
It makes me think of the book Steal Like an Artist.
I haven't
Did-
read it.
Oh, it's a quick read. You could probably read it in 30 minutes or less. Concept of the book is that nothing is really original. We all take a little of this, a little of that, a little of this, and then we create our original thing. But it's only because we've been stealing like an artist. We've been taking a little from what somebody else had created, who also took a little bit from what somebody else created, and then the cycle continues. Okay, this is good. It brought some good clarity and insight, and really kind of separating the threads of that experience to dive into it a bit deeper of what does it really mean to be a creator?
Yeah, and the thing is, because we confuse creating with doing, that's where I think people get really, they don't understand how
Mm.
profound being a creator and allowing ourselves to fully embody that experience, how profound that is. And we would have very different lives if we spent more time in creating, more time in our imagination, like we did when we were kids. See, that was a very natural process when we were kids. We were always imagining, always creating, whether we were playing dress up or creating new worlds, or, when we were playing with toys and creating whole universes, right?
Yeah.
And then that got conditioned out of us because the teacher's like, smarten up, pay attention. This is the real
Yep.
world,
Yep.
and we started to confuse the so-called real world for what matters. But actually, this whole world, everything you're experiencing is someone's creation.
Sure.
Even your own experience of the color blue is your brain's best guess creation based on the sensory input. In Russian, I think they have something like, I'm going to botch it, but I think they have like 11 or some crazy number of words for blue. Like there's so many different ways they can talk about blue because in their culture, it has sort of a importance to it. I'm not really sure the history of it, but I know that, and then there's other languages, you'll talk to people. It's like, I don't know how to say this in English.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What's the this that they're completely grounded in and aware of that they can't articulate? It shows you the limitations of the doing world. Because when we're using language, we're no longer in universal grammar. We're in limited symbolic doing world.
Yes.
Right?
Well, that's another topic. I have a lot of questions about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's save it for another episode and write it
Absolutely.
down and get it down.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, this is a bigger conversation for our listeners. And so we'd invite you to come check out Whole Life Architecture at tmicglobal.com. We are a school, an institute, a training facility, whatever words you want to use, to help our society drop into what does it mean to be a creator. And it's going to be one of the most important conversations, ironically, that we can be having, especially as we move into this age of AI, where the doing that our entire economy has been based on is going to be transitioned over to automation, to AI, to robots. You're going to say, well, what's left for me to do? That's the point. Not much. But there's a lot of creating that can happen because the AI and those robots are going to need direction for what the heck they're doing. And so we need creators. And so that's where
Agreed.
we're headed as an economy. So
Agreed. Great conversation, Chad. Thank you for your insights as always.
all right. Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you on the next episode of The Most Important Conversations.
That concludes this episode of The Most Important Conversations. This in-depth conversation could set you on the path to self-improvement, which is essential if you want to be an effective leader and take meaningful action in your life. If you enjoyed this episode and want more of these stimulating discussions, you can find them at tmicglobal.com. Remember, the world is at a crossroads right now. You can't afford to waste this opportunity to take charge of your life, build meaningful relationships with others, and co-create a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for listening. See you on the next one.